Good afternoon, everyone. Protecting women in our society. It seems a very odd thing almost to be talking about that in the 21st century. After all, haven't we come an awful long way? And I think the truth is that, yes, we have come an awful long way in certain societies, but there's still a lot to do. The 1 Billion Rising movement is a non-political global movement which is designing itself around the idea of highlighting to everyone the problems which are around the world in the way that women are abused and the violence that's used against them. What they're aiming to do is to raise awareness of the issues and the scale of that violence, and hopefully, by doing so, end it. That's the whole objective. These issues are often hidden or ignored, but it's estimated that around the world, 1 billion women, and the number is rising, have in fact been subject to some kind of abuse. The United Nations itself estimated that 1 in 3 women are at risk of being raped. UKIP strongly supports the objectives of the 1 Billion Rising movement. We are, though, very focused on what is happening here. In this country, we still are suffering quite significant amounts of violence and abuse against women. But before we go into that in too much detail, I want to debunk a couple of myths. First and foremost, that this issue is a women's issue. It isn't. It's an issue about law and order, particularly in this country. It's the fundamental issue about the rule of law and laws being applied fairly, without fear or favour, to every person who is subject to UK laws. It's the responsibility of everyone in our society to comply with those laws, and the right of everyone in our society to the protection of those laws. And law is the foundation of a fully functioning and cohesive society. It's the glue that binds us together. Second, this is not about making men feel guilty. What this is really about is saying to men, as women, particularly in this country, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Because we can't ignore the fact that it was a parliament composed entirely of men who ended all forms of slavery in this country and who gave us the vote. All the legislation that's been designed to promote fairness and enhance protections for women, like the Equal Pay Act and the outlawing of female genital mutilation, were passed by male-dominated parliaments. So, men, it's not about getting at you. Third, that a particular race or creed or socio-economic group is responsible particularly for violence against women. Not so. The forms of oppression and violence may differ, but it's the mindset which is the same. So what do we mean? We use the word violence, we use the word abuse. In this country, sadly, over the last 20 or 30 years, we've adopted euphemisms, words to take the sting out of what we're really talking about. They conceal the harsh realities. We speak of terminating a pregnancy. When that's done only because the fetus is female, it's akin to murder. That's against UK law. Domestic violence sounds pretty okay in a way, but that means smashed bones, damaged organs, burns, scalds, cuts. Not so domestic when you think about it. And all of those things are against UK law. We move on to female circumcision. Now it is acknowledged as genital mutilation. That means slicing into the flesh of children of little girls, and it's torture. That is against UK law. Trafficking, another word we use to disguise a horror, that means treating people as commodities, buying them, selling them, trading them into and throughout this country. It's a slavery, and that's against UK law. Forced marriage. In this country, and for centuries, no marriage which is not between willing people is legal. Neither is rape, inside or outside marriage. And so we come full circle, back to murder, honor killing. It's murder because a woman doesn't conform to a particular pattern of behavior against UK law. In this country, it's a disgrace and a reproach to all that despite these apparent legal protections, these outrages continue. A recent investigation by The Independent revealed that between 1,400 and 4,700 fetuses have been destroyed as a result of sex-selective abortions. On average, 2 women a week suffer so much domestic violence that they die. My colleague will be talking about FGM and that horror in more detail shortly. Figures on trafficking are hard to find, but a recent Association of Chief Police Officers report guesstimated that 17,000 women involved in off-street prostitution were migrants, most of whom were classed as vulnerable or trafficked. No specific figures are kept in respect of honour crime, but in 2011, police services recorded around 3,000 attacks, and of these it was estimated at least a dozen were murder. None of this is without cost. It's quite impossible to overstate the emotional and psychological costs of the victims. But there is also an economic cost to our overstretched NHS and to social services, among others. Most importantly, the fabric of our society pays a huge bill because it stops us being one society. The problem is that despite their rhetoric, grandstanding, as with so many serious issues facing our country, the political elite who've been running Britain over the last generation have looked the other way, just as Nick Clegg did over allegations of inappropriate behaviour by some of his senior people. Very minor by comparison, but he failed even to deal with that. Much vaunted gimmickry like women-only shortlists and equal numbers of women on boards of directors are smoke and mirrors deflecting attention away from the issues of life and death. I'd rather feel safe than have a seat on a board of directors. These issues have been pushed into the too difficult box. Setting up committees and reviews are largely displacement activities, the appearance of action when what's really needed is political leadership and courage to enforce UK laws in every street, in every town, in the country. The continuing and growing levels of violence against women are a reproach to us all. We should not go on tolerating them. Given the power, UKIP will act to ensure that everyone subject to UK laws abides by them or faces the consequence. And equally, that every child or woman subject to UK laws has the full protection of them. We are not in power, but we can still make our voices heard, show our support to the victims. UKIP's been setting the political agenda on many issues, particularly around immigration. Now we're making a stand about the protection of women in our society. Around the country, branches and regions will be getting together to light candles to provide a small glimmer of hope to victims and to say that we in UKIP have not forgotten your pain and your terror. But more, our little lights will combine to throw a harsh spotlight on the gross dereliction of duty by the Lib-Lab con parties in their failure to provide security under the law for all girls and women in the UK. It happened on their watch, but it was done in our name. Well, not anymore. It's got to stop. It's got to stop now. UKIP will show the way.